Zainabu Khan was 26 years old, an architecture graduate with big dreams, yet she lived like a shadow inside a house worth $4 million. The modern villa in Lekki Phase 1, Lagos, was famous in the neighborhood. People slowed their cars just to stare at it. Glass walls, sharp lines, perfect lighting. From outside, it looked like success had settled there. Inside, it felt like a cage. Since her father died 2 years ago, everything had changed. Madame Salima Khan, her stepmother, took control of the house and of Zainabu's life. She controlled the money, the staff, the rules, even the tone of Zainabu's voice. Zainabu was not allowed to question anything. Not the locked rooms. Not the sudden disappearance of her father's documents. Not the way Salima watched her like an enemy instead of a daughter. Zainabu learned to move quietly. She spoke softly. She stayed invisible. The same girl who once designed bold buildings at university now felt afraid to breathe too loudly in her own home. Every day she reminded herself, just survive. Just get through today. That night, the rain was heavy, angry, hit the glass windows like fists. Thunder rolled across the sky, and the lights flickered for a second. Zainabu stood alone in the living room, staring at her reflection in the marble floor. Her chest felt tight, like something was pressing down on her. She didn't know why, but she felt it deep inside. Something was about to break. Not the house. Not the storm. Salima's anger didn't start loudly. Never did. It always began with that cold smile, the one that made Zainabu's stomach tighten. Salima stood near the staircase, arms crossed, eyes sharp, watching Zainabu like she had been waiting for this moment all day. "So," Salima said slowly, "you've been moving around the house a lot lately." Zainabu froze. I was just what?" Salima snapped, stepping closer. "Trying to act important. Trying to act like this is still your father's house." The words hit hard. Zainabu lowered her eyes, the way she always did. Silence had become her shield. She believed if she stayed quiet, the storm would pass. But Salima hated silence. "You think I don't see you?" Salima continued, her voice rising. "Walking around like you own something here. Like you didn't get everything handed to you for free." Zainabu's hands shook. "I didn't say that." Salima laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't need to say it. Your face says everything. You think you're special because you're educated, because you have a degree. But let me remind you of something." She pointed around the massive living room. "Without this house, you are nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." Each word was slow, clear, and meant to hurt. Zainabu swallowed hard. "This was my father's home," she whispered. "That was the mistake." Salima's face changed instantly. The smile vanished, replaced by pure rage. "My husband built this life," she screamed. "And you're trying to steal his legacy from me." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Zainabu stared at her in shock. "I'm not trying to steal anything." "Liar!" Salima shouted. "You've always been waiting for me to slip, waiting to take what's mine." Her voice echoed through the house, bouncing off the glass walls. Rain thundered outside, matching the chaos inside. Zainabu backed away slowly. "Please, I don't want any trouble." But Salima moved closer, faster now. "Don't play innocent with me. Girls like you pretend to be quiet while planning everything in your head." Zainabu's heart pounded. She felt trapped between the marble wall and Salima's fury. The insults kept coming. About her mother, her future, her worth. Every sentence was sharp, humiliating, carefully chosen to break her down. Still Zainabu said nothing. And that silence fed the rage. Salima's voice dropped low, dangerous. "I should have sent you away the day your father died." Zainabu felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to cry. Crying only made Salima worse. The argument was no longer words. It was hatred. Old jealousy, buried for years, was spilling out without control. In that moment, Zainabu realized Salima wasn't just angry. She was ready to destroy her. Zainabu didn't even see the slap coming. 1 second Salima was shouting, the next there was a sharp sound that cracked through the room. Pain exploded across Zainabu's face. Her head snapped to the side and she stumbled, shocked more than hurt at first. She tasted blood instantly. Warm, metallic, real. Before she could react, Salima shoved her hard. Zainabu's back slammed into the cold marble wall. The impact knocked the air out of her lungs. She slid down slowly, her legs giving up, her mind struggling to understand what was happening. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't discipline. This was violence. "You think you can challenge me?" Salima screamed, her voice shaking with rage. "In my house." Zainabu tried to speak, but no sound came out. Her chest burned. Her ears rang. She pressed her hand to her mouth and saw blood on her fingers. That's when fear finally took over. Salima stepped closer, towering over her. "I own everything now," she shouted. "This house, this life, even you." Another push sent Zainabu fully to the floor. She curled into herself without thinking, arms over her head, knees pulled in. It was instinct, survival. She felt small, helpless like a child again. Salima kept screaming. Words poured out like poison. How Zainabu was ungrateful, useless, a burden she should have gotten rid of long ago. Each sentence landed harder than the slap. The house echoed with Salima's voice, loud and wild, while rain crashed against the windows outside. Zainabu lay there shaking. Her body hurt, but her heart hurt more. She had endured insults before. Control. Humiliation. But this was different. Something had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As Salima paced the room, still yelling, Zainabu stared at the floor through blurry eyes. She noticed a small crack in the marble tile near her face. She had walked past it 100 times before. Now it felt like the only thing keeping her grounded. In that moment, a terrifying thought settled into her mind. If I stay silent tonight, I may not survive the next time. The realization hit harder than the slap. Salima wasn't calming down. She was enjoying the power, enjoying the fear. And Zainabu understood then that silence was no longer safety. It was danger. Salima finally stormed away, her footsteps heavy as she went upstairs, still muttering threats under her breath. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the house. Zainabu stayed on the floor long after everything went quiet. Her body trembled uncontrollably. Tears finally fell, silent and hot. She pressed her forehead to the cold marble and breathed slowly, forcing herself to stay awake, to stay aware. The girl who believed patience would protect her was gone. Something inside Zainabu had changed forever. Salima had just disappeared upstairs when the house fell into a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The kind that rings in your ears after shouting stops. Zainabu was still on the floor, her back against the marble wall, breathing slowly, trying to steady her shaking hands. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't soft. It wasn't polite. It was loud, sharp, and urgent, cutting through the silence like a knife. Zainabu flinched. At the same moment, thunder exploded outside, so loud it felt like the sky was cracking open. Rain slammed harder against the glass walls, the wind howling like it was angry too. The timing was so sudden it felt unreal, like a scene from a movie. Upstairs, Salima stopped. Zainabu heard it, the pause in Salima's footsteps, the sudden stillness. Even Salima was surprised. Who would come to a mansion like this so late at night, during a storm? Zainabu slowly lifted her hand to her mouth. Her lip was swollen, split. She wiped away the blood with the back of her hand, her heart beating so fast it hurt. Every part of her body screamed to stay still, to hide, to not make a sound. The doorbell rang again. This time it was longer, more deliberate. Whoever was outside wasn't leaving. Salima's voice floated down from the stairs, sharp and tense. "Who is that?" Zainabu didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat felt tight, like it was closing up. Another crash of thunder shook the house. The lights flickered, then steadied. Shadows danced across the walls, making the room feel even larger and emptier than before. The sound at the door came again, but this time it wasn't the bell. It was a knock, 3 firm knocks, low, confident. Zainabu's pulse pounded in her ears. This wasn't a neighbor. This wasn't a mistake. The knock sounded like someone who knew exactly where they were standing and why. Salima came halfway down the stairs, her face tight with anger and something else, fear. She looked toward the front door, then at Zainabu on the floor, as if trying to decide what to do. "Get up," Salima hissed. "Go to your room." Zainabu tried to stand, but her legs felt weak. She leaned against the wall, forcing herself upright. Her eyes stayed on the door, drawn to it like a magnet. The knock came again, louder, more impatient. Zainabu felt a strange feeling rise inside her, confusion mixed with hope. No one ever came looking for her. No one ever knocked on that door for her. Outside, rain poured like the world was being washed clean. Inside, time felt frozen. Salima straightened her clothes, wiped her face, and forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Stay where you are," she warned. But Zainabu couldn't look away from the door. Deep down she felt it. That knock wasn't random. It was about to change everything. Salima opened the door with a forced smile, the kind that looked polite but felt fake. Cold rain rushed in immediately, carrying the smell of wet earth and thunder. Standing at the entrance was a man Zainabu had never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed despite the storm, his dark suit soaked and clinging to him. Water dripped from his hair onto the marble floor, but he didn't seem to care. His face was calm, serious, and focused, like someone who had come for a reason, not by accident. Before Salima could speak, the man looked past her and said clearly, "Is Zainabu Khan here?" The question hit the room like lightning. Salima's smile froze. For a split second, panic flashed across her face before she tried to hide it. "Who is asking?" she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. Zainabu's heart almost stopped. No one ever asked for her. Not by name. Not like this. The man's eyes moved around the room and landed on Zainabu. She was standing near the wall, her face pale, her lips swollen. Their eyes met, and something in his expression softened. "You must be Zainabu," he said gently. Her legs felt weak, but she stepped forward anyway, trembling. "Why, yes, I am." Salima immediately stepped in front of her. "She's busy," she said quickly. "And you are soaking my floor. Who are you?" The man straightened and reached into his jacket. "My name is Elijah Mensa," he said calmly. "And I've been looking for Zainabu Khan for a very long time." Salima's breathing changed. "Looking for her why?" she demanded. Elijah pulled out a leather folder, holding it carefully. "Because her father appointed me as her legal trustee." The room went completely silent. Zainabu blinked, unsure she heard correctly. "My father," she whispered. "Yes," Elijah replied, turning to her. "Your father, Mr. Khan, named me in his will. I was responsible for ensuring his final wishes were carried out." Salima laughed suddenly, loud and forced. "That's ridiculous," she said. "My husband never mentioned you." Elijah met her gaze without fear. "That doesn't change the truth." Zainabu felt dizzy. Her father had left something behind. Someone. All this time. Elijah looked at her swollen lip, the tension in her shoulders. His voice softened. "I'm sorry I'm arriving like this. The storm delayed me, but I had to find you tonight." "Why tonight?" Zainabu asked quietly. Elijah hesitated for a second, then said, "Because there are things you need to know, and because I was worried you weren't safe." Salima's face went pale. "This is my house," she snapped. "You can't just walk in here making claims." Elijah nodded slowly. "Actually," he said, "that's one of the things we need to talk about." Zainabu's hands trembled as she stood there, rainwater pooling near her feet, her heart racing. For the first time since her father died, someone had come looking for her. And nothing would ever be the same again. The room felt smaller as Elijah stepped fully inside and closed the door behind him. The storm stayed outside, but the tension followed him in. Salima stood stiff near the entrance, arms crossed tightly, her eyes fixed on the folder in Elijah's hands like it was a weapon. Elijah moved toward the dining table and placed the folder down carefully. "I won't take much of your time," he said calmly. "But the truth can't stay buried anymore." Zainabu stood a few steps away, her heart pounding. She felt like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Salima let out a sharp laugh. "There is no truth here," she said. "My husband is dead." Everything he owned became mine. Elijah nodded slowly. That's what you told her, he said, glancing at Zainabu. But that's not what the law says. He opened the folder and pulled out several documents, thick and official-looking. He laid them out one by one, smoothing the pages as if giving them respect. Your father prepared his will months before his death, Elijah said, turning to Zainabu. He was very clear, very careful. Zainabu's breath caught. What did he say? She asked. Elijah met her eyes. He left everything to you. The words didn't make sense at first. Everything. The Lekki villa, Elijah continued gently. The $4 million property. The offshore accounts set up in your name. The investment properties in Accra and Kigali. All of it. Zainabu felt the room spin. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. Salima shook her head violently. No, she said. That's a lie. He would never. He did, Elijah interrupted, still calm. You were named as a temporary caretaker only. Nothing more. Salima's face tightened. Caretaker, she repeated. Yes, Elijah said. You were allowed to manage the estate until Zainabu reached full independence. You were never the owner. Silence fell like a heavy blanket. Zainabu looked at Salima. For the first time she didn't see power or control. She saw fear. Elijah slid another paper forward. These documents are court-registered, he said. Sealed. Verified. There's also video testimony from your father explaining his decisions. Zainabu's eyes filled with tears. She remembered her father's voice, his kindness, the way he used to tell her to stand tall. He hadn't abandoned her after all. Salima's confidence cracked. Her shoulders slumped slightly, and her voice lost its sharp edge. You're trying to destroy me, she whispered. No, Elijah replied. The truth is doing that on its own. Zainabu slowly stepped closer to the table, looking at the papers that carried her name. Her hands shook as she touched them. This was real. This was hers. Salima took a step back, as if the house itself was rejecting her. For the first time since her father died, Zainabu felt something shift deep inside her. Power had changed hands. Salima's face turned red. Her eyes flashed with anger and disbelief as she pointed a trembling finger at Elijah. This is impossible. You're lying. You're trying to steal what's mine, she screamed, her voice echoing through the vast villa. I've lived here. I've run this house. How dare you come here with these lies? Elijah stayed calm. Not a flicker of fear. Not a hint of hesitation. He placed his hands on the table and looked directly at her. Salima, he said slowly, I am not lying. These documents are real. Everything here is verified by the courts. Salima shook her head violently. Courts? What courts? My husband never mentioned you. You're a fraud. Elijah opened another folder and pulled out a series of thick, official papers. Fraud? He asked, his voice steady. These are court-sealed documents. Here is the will. Here is the legal declaration naming Zainabu as the sole heir. And here are the bank statements showing all assets in her name. Your control over this house was temporary. Legally, you never owned a thing. Salima stumbled back as he laid out each piece of evidence carefully on the table. The papers glistened under the chandelier light, official stamps and seals visible on every page. She tried to reach for one, to tear it, to refute it, but her hands shook too much. Elijah pulled out a small tablet. And this, he said, tapping the screen, is video testimony from your late husband. Listen to his words, Salima. Every decision, every instruction. He left nothing to you. Everything was meant for Zainabu. Salima's eyes widened. She tried to look away, to shut out the evidence, but the words, the papers, the videos, they were undeniable. Her control, her power, her carefully built illusion, it all crumbled in front of her. Zainabu, standing a few feet away, felt a strange mixture of shock, relief, and hope. She had always believed her father wanted her to be free, but seeing the proof in front of her made it real. The fear that had trapped her for years began to loosen. Salima's breathing grew ragged. She staggered, finally letting her hands drop to her sides. The mask of authority, of cruelty, slipped entirely. The house she had ruled with intimidation and anger, the house that had made Zainabu small and silent, was never hers. Elijah looked at Zainabu and gave a small nod. "It's time to reclaim what is rightfully yours," he said. Salima slumped into a chair, staring blankly at the papers. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, had no power left. "This can't be," she whispered. "Yes," Elijah replied quietly. "It is. And it's final." For the first time, Zainabu didn't shrink. She stepped closer, eyes steady, feeling the weight of years lift. The power had shifted completely, and the villa that had trapped her for so long finally felt like it could be hers. Her home, her life, her freedom. Elijah pulled out his phone, dialed a number, and spoke quietly but firmly. Zainabu watched him, unsure what would happen next. Her body still trembled from the confrontation, her lips still stung from Salima's slap, and her heart raced with a mixture of fear and hope. Minutes later, flashing red and blue lights cut through the heavy rain outside. Zainabu's breath caught. Police cars pulled up to the gate, the officers stepping out with calm authority, rain dripping from their uniforms. They didn't rush in. They didn't shout. They just moved with purpose. And the air in the mansion shifted immediately. Salima's face drained of color. Her confidence, already shaken by Elijah's documents, crumbled completely. She looked from the flashing lights to Zainabu and back again, realizing her control was gone for good. An officer approached. "Madam, we received a report. Please come with us," he said politely but firmly. Salima opened her mouth, tried to argue, tried to wave it off, but no one listened. Two officers gently but firmly took her by the arms and guided her toward the waiting car. She struggled slightly, sputtering protests, but it was useless. The power she had wielded over this house for years had vanished in an instant. Zainabu's legs felt weak as she watched. She had never imagined seeing this moment, the woman who had terrorized her for so long being let out, forced to leave the mansion. She felt a strange mixture of relief, disbelief, and freedom washing over her. Once Salima was in the car, the officers locked the gates behind her. The mansion felt different. The heavy air of fear and tension that had hung in every room seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet, almost sacred stillness. For the first time in years, Zainabu walked through the front hall and didn't feel afraid. She didn't feel trapped. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, taking in the reality. Police had witnessed the assault. Reports had been filed. Fraud, abuse, intimidation. It all had been documented. For the first time, Zainabu felt protected by the law, by someone outside herself. Elijah stood nearby, giving her a small, reassuring nod. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Zainabu nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not from pain but from relief. The house that had once been a place of fear, of bruises and threats, now felt like it could be hers to live in, truly hers. She walked slowly through the mansion, touching the walls, looking out the windows at the storm finally beginning to ease. The lights from the police cars faded in the distance, replaced by the soft glow of her chandeliers. For the first time Zainabu felt it, safety. Real solid, undeniable safety. And as she breathed in that quiet, peaceful air, she realized something had shifted forever. The mansion that had been a prison was finally her home, and she was no longer afraid. The mansion was quiet now. No shouting, no footsteps storming down the hall, no sharp words cutting through the air. Zainabu walked slowly through the familiar rooms, each step feeling different than before. She had seen this house as a prison for years, a place that held her small and afraid. Now it felt different. She reached the first locked door she had never been allowed to open. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the key, the sound of the lock clicking open echoing in the empty room. Inside were shelves full of books, old letters, and boxes she hadn't been allowed to touch. She ran her hand across the dusty surface and smiled faintly. For the first time, she could touch her father's things without fear. Moving through the house, Zainabu began clearing out reminders of Salima's control. Small trinkets, framed photos, letters, anything that had been used to intimidate or humiliate her. Some of the items brought tears, memories of harsh words and cruel punishments, but she tossed them anyway. Each item that left the house felt like a weight lifting off her shoulders. In the kitchen, she opened cabinets she had never been allowed to use, ran her fingers along counters, and breathed deeply. She noticed the sunlight coming through the large windows, how it bounced off the polished marble floors. The space felt alive, welcoming. The same walls that had trapped her now seemed to embrace her. Her bedroom felt the most different. She walked inside, touching the bedspread her father had once chosen for her, the curtains she had loved as a child. Tears came, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of release, of relief, of realizing she could finally be herself. Zainabu paused in the center of the room and closed her eyes. The pain of the past years didn't disappear. It would never fully disappear. But the fear, the constant tension that had gripped her chest every day, was gone. In its place was strength, a quiet, steady strength that she had discovered within herself during the storm, the confrontations, the legal battles. She walked back into the living room, looking around at the space she had once only dared to glance at from a distance. The chandelier sparkled above her, the marble floors reflected the soft afternoon light, and the furniture, once a symbol of Salima's control, now felt like it belonged to her. For the first time, Zainabu smiled freely. She didn't just survive the house anymore. She owned it in every sense. It wasn't just her father's legacy, or the legal documents, or the wealth that made it hers. It was her courage, her choices, her strength. Sitting down on the sofa, she took a deep breath. The mansion that had hurt her, terrified her, and trapped her for so long had finally become a home. And this time she felt safe. She felt whole. She felt free. For the first time in her life, Zainabu could finally breathe. Months passed, and Zainabu's life transformed in ways she had never imagined. The mansion in Lekki was no longer just a home. It had become a symbol of her strength, a place that reminded her daily of what she had survived and conquered. She still felt the echoes of fear from the past, but now they fueled her instead of breaking her. With a clear purpose, Zainabu founded a non-profit in Lagos for girls and young women facing domestic abuse. She wanted them to know they weren't alone, that silence wasn't the only option, and that their voices could be powerful. She poured her energy into the foundation, organizing safe shelters, legal support, counseling, and public awareness campaigns. Every girl she helped reminded her of herself, a younger version of her trapped in silence. Her story soon went viral online. People shared it across social media, in news articles, and on blogs. It was raw, real, and impossible to ignore. Messages poured in from girls thanking her, women telling her how inspired they were, and even men acknowledging the courage it took to stand up and reclaim power in the face of fear. Zainabu read every message, letting the words sink in, letting them remind her of how far she had come. During one foundation event, a young girl asked her, "How did you find the courage to fight back?" Zainabu smiled, feeling the weight of all her experiences in that single moment. She looked around at the room full of girls, all eager to reclaim their own voices, and said firmly, "I didn't inherit money. I inherited my voice." And with that, she realized that everything she had lost, control, comfort, silence, had been replaced by something far greater, power, purpose, and the unstoppable strength of her own voice. She was no longer a victim. She was untouchable,